Heritage Land. The morning sun cast golden rays across the sprawling acres of Willow Creek Farm. 93-year-old Esther Washington sat on her weathered porch swing, her dark hands, wrinkled with age but still strong, wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. The farm had been in her family for 5 generations, passed down since her great-grandfather Tom had purchased it in 1867, just after emancipation. 200 acres of the most fertile soil in Maplewood County. "Another beautiful day the Lord has made," Esther whispered to herself, her voice carrying the rich depth of someone who had witnessed nearly a century of history. She rocked gently, her eyes surveying the land she knew better than the lines on her palm. The cornfield stretched toward the horizon, rows perfectly aligned like soldiers standing at attention. To the east, peach trees bloomed with promise. Beyond them, the old oak where her father had taught her to read stood sentinel over the property. Esther's home wasn't just land. It was legacy. It was survival. During Jim Crow, when black ownership was actively discouraged, or worse, violently opposed, her parents had held on to Willow Creek Farm with unyielding determination. Through drought, through economic depression, through night riders and burning crosses, the Washingtons had persisted. A pickup truck rumbled down the long dirt driveway, kicking up dust clouds that spiraled into the morning air. Esther recognized Ben Porter's blue Chevy. The young man had been helping around the farm since his grandfather, Esther's longtime friend, had passed 3 years ago. "Morning, Miss Esther. Brought those seeds you wanted," Ben called out, stepping from his truck with a brown paper package. "Right on time, son." Esther smiled, her face illuminating with warmth. "The north field won't plant itself." She didn't mention the letter she'd received yesterday. The one with no return address. The one that had said, "Time for you people to move on. This land deserves better owners." She wouldn't burden Ben with that worry. Not yet. Not when there was work to be done. Behind her smile, Esther felt a weight pressing down. It wasn't the first threatening message she'd received in recent weeks. But at 93, she'd seen too much history to be easily intimidated. Willow Creek Farm had withstood generations of hatred. It would withstand this too. Or so she hoped. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows crawled past Esther's property that afternoon. They moved slowly, predatory. Ben noticed them first while fixing the irrigation pump. "Miss Esther, that's the 3rd time I've seen those vehicles today," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Something ain't right." Esther nodded grimly. "They call themselves the Heritage Protection Alliance. Been making trouble all over the county." She handed Ben the stack of letters she'd been hiding. 6 in total, each more threatening than the last. The most recent included photographs of her home taken at night. "Lord have mercy," Ben whispered, eyes widening. "We need to call the sheriff." "Already did. Sheriff Parker said there's nothing he can do until they actually trespass." Esther's voice hardened. His daddy was the same way back in '65 when they burned the Richardson place down. That evening, Esther received a call from Tyler Reed, a local real estate developer with close ties to town leadership. "Mrs. Washington, I understand you're having some troubles," his voice oozed false sympathy. "I'd be happy to take that land off your hands. Fair market value, of course. You could move somewhere safer. A nice retirement community, perhaps?" "Mr. Reed, this farm isn't for sale. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever." Esther's voice didn't waver. "I'd reconsider if I were you," Reed's tone chilled. "These are dangerous times for a woman alone. Especially someone of your background." After hanging up, Esther sat at her kitchen table, hands trembling slightly. The Heritage Protection Alliance wasn't just some fringe hate group. They had connections, influence. This was organized. Strategic. They wanted her land. And they weren't planning to take no for an answer. A week passed. The threats escalated rapidly. Esther woke to find her mailbox destroyed, splinters of wood scattered across the driveway entrance. The next day, someone cut through her fence, allowing her small herd of cattle to wander onto the highway. Sheriff Parker called it teenage vandalism. Despite the spray-painted slurs on her barn door, Ben started sleeping in his truck outside her house, shotgun across his lap. She told him to go home, that she'd be fine. He refused. "My granddaddy would haunt me till Judgment Day if I left you alone now, Miss Esther," he said, jaw set firm. Late Thursday night, the intimidation reached new heights. Esther jolted awake to the crack of gunfire. She reached for her late husband's revolver in the nightstand drawer. From her window, she saw flames dancing at the edge of her property. A burning cross illuminated 5 hooded figures beside it. Ben burst through her front door. "Miss Esther! Stay down!" More shots rang out, this time striking the house. Glass shattered in the living room. Ben crawled to her on the bedroom floor. "They're trying to scare you out tonight," he whispered, his young face twisted with anger and fear. "I called 911 3 times. No one's coming." Esther's phone rang. It was Tyler Reed again. "Final offer, Mrs. Washington," his voice slick with confidence. "Sign the papers tonight, and this all stops. Otherwise..." He let the threat hang unspoken. Esther's hand gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Mr. Reed, my great-grandfather bought this land with money he saved for 7 years after slavery. My family has defended it for over 150 years. Do you really think your little show out there scares me?" She hung up and began dialing another number. Her hands weren't trembling anymore. "Who are you calling?" Ben asked, peeking carefully through the curtains. "My son." Esther's voice was calm, determined. "It's time Marcus came home." 36 hours later, a midnight blue rental car pulled up to Esther's farmhouse. The door opened, and Marcus Washington stepped out. At 48, he stood 6'3" with shoulders broad as an oak beam. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had left him with a body like weathered steel and eyes that missed nothing. "Mama," he said simply, embracing Esther with gentle strength. She seemed smaller in his arms than when he'd last seen her 2 years ago. "You didn't have to come so fast," she said, though her relief was palpable. "Yes, I did." Marcus surveyed the bullet holes in the siding, the broken windows now covered with plywood. His expression remained neutral, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Inside, Ben explained everything: the letters, the vandalism, the burning cross, Sheriff Parker's indifference, and Tyler Reed's involvement. Marcus listened silently, removing items from his duffel bag. A laptop. A satellite phone. Several small devices Ben couldn't identify. "They'll be back," Marcus finally said, his voice low and even. "Men like this always return to finish what they started." "What are we going to do?" Ben asked, eyes wide with hope at finally having reinforcements. Marcus placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. "First, we document everything. Then we prepare." He turned to Ben with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And then we give them exactly what they're asking for." "What's that?" Ben asked. "A war they can't win." Saturday night, just past midnight. 4 black SUVs rumbled down Esther's driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness. 8 men emerged, faces concealed by masks, carrying shotguns and gasoline canisters. "Remember, no one gets hurt," Tyler Reed instructed from the lead vehicle. "Just scare the old woman enough that she'll sign tomorrow." As they approached the farmhouse, motion-activated floodlights suddenly blazed on, bathing the yard in harsh white light. The men froze, momentarily blinded. A voice boomed through hidden speakers. "This is private property. You are trespassing. Leave immediately." The men laughed nervously, regrouping. "Fancy lights won't save you," one called out. "Sign the papers by morning or we burn it all down." Marcus stepped out onto the porch. Unlike the would-be intimidators, he wore no mask. His face was calm, almost serene. In one hand, he held a smartphone. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "I've just sent footage of you trespassing to the FBI, the state police, and 3 national news organizations. I've also forwarded your names, vehicle registrations, and phone records to a contact at the Department of Justice." The men stiffened. One stepped forward, raising his shotgun. "You're bluffing." Marcus smiled. "After serving in 6 war zones, I've learned many things. One is to always have irrefutable evidence." He held up the phone. Every threatening letter. Every incident of vandalism. The burning cross. All documented, with proof linking back to Heritage Protection Alliance and Reed Development LLC. Tyler Reed stepped out from his SUV. "You've got nothing." "I've got everything, Mr. Reed," Marcus replied. "Including recordings of your phone calls threatening my mother. The question is, do you really want this to become national news? How many investors will stand by you when they see hooded men with guns threatening a 93-year-old black woman who survived Jim Crow?" Reed's face contorted with rage. "You people always think you're so," Marcus cut him off. "So ready to defend what's ours?" "Yes. We are." He descended the porch steps. "Now you have a choice. Leave and never return, or I release everything. Your reputations. Your business empire. Your freedom. All gone by morning." The standoff stretched for 10 tense seconds. Then one of the men lowered his weapon and backed away. Another followed. Soon only Reed remained defiant. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes," Marcus said, stepping closer until they were face to face. "It is." 3 months later, Esther sat on her porch swing again, watching the autumn sun bathe her fields in golden light. The farm looked different now. New fencing surrounded the property. Security cameras stood discreetly at strategic positions. The house gleamed with fresh paint and repaired windows, but the biggest change wasn't physical. Dozens of cars lined the driveway and the edge of the cornfield, which had been transformed into a community gathering space. Tables overflowed with food, pies, casseroles, barbecue. Children played tag between rows of corn while adults chatted in groups. The Washington Farm Cooperative celebration was in full swing. After the confrontation, Marcus had released the evidence anyway, not to humiliate, but to reveal the truth. Tyler Reed now faced federal charges for conspiracy and civil rights violations. Sheriff Parker had resigned in disgrace. Several members of the Heritage Protection Alliance had turned state's evidence. More importantly, the community had rallied. Farmers, black, white, Latino, had come together, sharing resources and knowledge. The Washington Farm Cooperative now included 15 family farms working collaboratively, with Esther's property as its heart. Marcus stepped onto the porch, offering his mother a glass of lemonade. "What do you think, Mama? Dad would be proud, wouldn't he?" Esther nodded, her eyes misting as she looked out at the community gathered on land her ancestors had fought to preserve. "This was always the dream," she said softly. "Not just to own the land, but to share its blessings." She reached for her son's hand. "Thank you for coming home." Marcus squeezed her fingers gently. "Some things are worth fighting for." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across generations of history, Esther Washington knew with absolute certainty that Willow Creek Farm would endure. Not just as her family's legacy, but as a testament to justice, community, and the enduring power of roots that run deep.